In Britain, we have had over a quarter of a million people issued non-crime hate incidents. As we speak, there are people in prison for quite literally reposting memes. We have extensive prison sentences and for tweets, social media posts, and general free speech issues. Would the Trump administration consider political asylum for British citizens in such a situation?
Well, to your latter question, it's a very good one. I have not heard that proposed to the president, nor have I spoken to him about that idea, but I certainly can and talk to our national security team and see if it's something the administration would entertain.
What an interesting thought. Well, music fans might recognize the man who asked that question to White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt last week. It was none other than Winston Marshall, co-founder, former banjoist and lead guitarist for the Grammy Award-winning band Mumford and Sons. Now, these days, Marshall's a podcast host and political commentator in the UK. He left Mumford and Sons back in 2021 after being so-called canceled for the misdeed of expressing his own political opinion, and has since become an outspoken advocate for free speech. And it's our pleasure to welcome him now on the show. Winston, it's nice to see you, and thanks so much for coming on today. What was that moment like to really ask Caroline Leavitt that question?
A very good morning to you. And actually, if I may, here in London where I am, we're celebrating Victory in Europe Day, the 80th anniversary of victory over the Nazi regime. And I just want to say a continued thank you to the Americans for the sacrifices they made in that war so that we might defeat the scourge of fascism here in Europe. It's something we will never forget. Yes, it was a great pleasure to be at the White House, and quite surreal, really. Amongst several things, I had the opportunity to ask the press secretary, Madam Caroline Leavitt, questions. One of the two questions I got to ask was about free speech, which we have serious problems with here in Britain. I will give you, in the question, I referenced the 250,000 non-crime hate incidences that have been issued over the last 10 odd years. They include one young girl got one for calling a classmate or saying that a classmate smelt like fish. Another person got one for hanging soiled jeans on a clothesline. There's actually more ridiculous ones. But we also have people who have faced lengthy prison sentences for social media posts. I mentioned someone having 8 weeks for reposting memes. That was someone called Lee Dunn. Another woman called Cameron Bell, who was only about 24 years old, was sentenced to 9 months for live streaming the aftermath of the riots that followed the horrendous murders in Southport last summer on TikTok. And she got 9 months. Things are getting worse still, if I may.
Sure.
It's that the government, the Labour government under Sir Keir Starmer, our Prime Minister, are currently deliberating how and when to implement Islamophobia laws, which means you won't be able to criticize the religion of Islam. You won't be able to critique its various tenets or what is written in it, where you're, of course, allowed to critique Christianity, Judaism, and all other beliefs, but you won't be allowed to critique Islam. This is actually something that members of Parliament are standing up and arguing for at the Palace of Westminster. So the situation regards free speech in Britain today is really quite concerning.
Well, thank you for enlightening our viewers with those examples, because, you know, we hear it stateside, right? Even during COVID, you couldn't post certain things about speaking out against the lockdowns or the vaccine. You would have been censored. But what's happening overseas? I mean, goodness gracious, just live streaming seems to be controversial. We've got another example, if I may, the Times UK, sort of illustrating how out of control things have become. The headline reading, police made 30 arrests a day for offensive online messages. Police sent 6 officers to detain a couple and put them in a cell for 8 hours after their child's primary school objected to the volume of emails they sent and disparaging comments made in a WhatsApp group. I mean, again, just several examples there. But you think of the country of Great Britain here and the UK. There's so much rich history. I obviously believe, you know, the US is the greatest country in the world. I'm a bit biased here being born, but we're relatively young compared to other countries around the globe. Is the UK working to keep that history, or what you've noticed, are things changing?
Well, I think there was a significant departure in 1776, and you guys, genius move actually, you had your First Amendment, which enshrined that not only in law that the government couldn't impede on the free speech of citizens, but it also bred a culture in America of free speech. Now, in Britain, we're famous for great tracts defending free speech. You'll think of John Stuart Mill, you'll think of John Locke, of John Milton, all who wrote famous pieces writing on liberty or Areopagitica. The reason they had to write these pieces is because we have been a constant battle against censors, really for our entire history. But what's got much worse since the end of the war, and particularly since mass migration, is with rising disunity and chaos between different groups within Britain. What has happened is that various successive governments, and by the way, the Conservative government have been just as bad as the Labour government regard this, they have decided to deal with such problems by clamping down on speech. So basically now there is a mountain of different laws that were built on what we had before, which was the tradition of free speech through common law. Now we have various laws, public order acts, communication acts. We're going to there's dozens and dozens of these things that have accreted in the last couple of decades to stop people from speaking. Quite literally, I mean, I mentioned non-crime hate incident. If someone perceives you to be offensive, even if it's not to them, if they perceive you to be offensive to someone else, even if that someone else themselves does not consider it offensive, they can report you to the police, and the police will book you. I mean, I can give more ludicrous examples. There was one police officer, ironically, called Harry Miller, who got a visit from the police himself because he posted on Twitter, "I identify as fish, please don't misspecies me," and that was deemed transphobic. Now, we have very few protections in the law, and I could bore you with the detail. He managed to get away with it because of a bit of law that we have still from Europe. But in Britain, we need a clear out. We need to get rid of all of this crap that's built up, and it's really it's concerning, and it might get worse.
Sure. Look, Winston, it's no surprise that celebrities or people in Hollywood or even musicians have come out in favor of certain political candidates, especially I think of the 2024 presidential election. They're normally left of center. They're more liberal leaning. You're obviously a more right of center person with a more conservative viewpoint here. I know you were a member of Mumford and Sons. Viewers might recognize the band. But could you speak to what's next for you, or maybe what you personally experienced when you just come out and support your free speech viewpoints?
Well, small corrections. I actually still identify as liberal in sort of a black British classical liberal sense of the word. But I don't know if you've seen those memes. It's that the left has gone so far left that those of us who thought we were liberals and the centre apparently now are conservatives.
Right.
But I'm not sure I am. But you know, we have now a very surreal thing happened with my partner at home. Is I had to explain to her, look, if the police knock on the door, this is the protocol now. So and this is very common in households now. I said to her, just start filming, record everything that happens. And you might think that that's a joke, but famously a Telegraph journalist, very prestigious newspaper, Alison Pearson was the journalist, got a knock on the door for a tweet that she had actually long deleted a year before. Where she misidentified a flag as a Hamas flag and was critical of the Hamas flag, but when she realized it wasn't one, she immediately deleted it. A year later, she gets on the knock on the door. My lawyer has advised me a couple of times that my tweets might be deemed technically illegal on various different grounds, because as I say, there are so many different ways in which they can crack down on you. I'm not mistaken. There are more people are being clamped down on for speech in Britain than in Russia. The exact details I don't have to mind, and it might be worse since the war in Russia. But it's absolutely the case that there's a sense of everyone being extremely careful about what they say.
Well, that's a shame. Again, you know, one of our great tenets here is the First Amendment, the freedom of speech in the United States. We're privileged to have that privilege. We understand that's not the same all around the world. Winston Marshall, thanks so much for coming on and sharing your thoughts with me and our viewers this morning. I do appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. Take care. Bye.